Alright, hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about why what we see on social media is fake and why understanding this and really critically thinking about this is so important for our mental health. And how even though I know that a lot of us are aware on some level that social media is fake and that what we're seeing on social media isn't real, and that when we compare our lives to the people that we see on social media, we are always going to feel bad about ourselves because we are missing context, we are missing information, we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes. That is part of it. And I think, again, a lot of us really kind of understand this intellectually, but there's parts of our perception as human beings that is being kind of hijacked in this whole social media age that a lot of us aren't aware of. And that's what I want to talk about today, is the kind of subconscious ways that we are being influenced and that we are comparing ourselves and that we're filling in gaps when we're looking at people on social media, and how we're not aware of that, and how it's tending to make us feel like we are failures, or like we're doing something wrong in life, or like we're not as good as other people, when in real reality we're doing fine, and we really don't need to be comparing ourselves the ways that we're saying we're comparing ourselves. And this is just, again, something that I feel is so important for us to talk about, because we are all on social media, and I think, right, we can have conversations till we're blue in the face about how to limit it and how to manage it and how to be on there in healthy ways and unhealthy ways and all of this stuff. But if we're not allowing ourselves to engage with it, when we're engaging with it with this critical thinking in mind, it's not going to matter how much we, change our amount of time we spend on it, or change what we're doing while we're on it, or who we're watching even. If we aren't able to really connect to what's happening in our brains when we're looking at someone on social media, and to really be conscious of that, and to be aware of it, and to know what's going on in our heads, nothing is going to change with our kind of interactions with social media and with how they are affecting us. Okay? So that's one part of it. And yeah, again, I really want to talk about social media in a way where, hopefully, if you have feelings of shame or guilt around how much time you spend on social media, if you're feeling like social media is this bad thing that robs you of your life, and you're feeling like you're addicted to it, or there's something wrong with you that you scroll all day instead of doing what you should be doing, I want to speak to this, and I want to first let you know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. There's nothing to be ashamed of with that. These things are perfectly designed and set up to absolutely take over hours and hours of our time. And it's not your fault, and it's how your brain works, and they understand how your brain works, and they're using that information to design the algorithms that are keeping us sucked in. And hopefully I can give some tools for, again, how to engage with this stuff in a healthy way, in a way that can feel supportive, because social media doesn't have to be terrible. It can actually be a really good thing, and how we can do that. Okay, so before we get into all of that, I just want to thank today's sponsor, which is my mystery school. So yeah, if you haven't signed up, I would love for you to check it out. It's essentially, at this point, a 5-year self-study course. I am currently releasing the 5th curriculum, which is really, really practice heavy and all about integrating everything we've learned in all the other courses. So it is an evergreen course. There's always new information being added. We meet every month for private meetings. We have a private Facebook group, and the money that comes from that really goes towards me being able to do more free stuff like this. So thank you for everyone who's in the school. Thank you for everyone who's ever been a part of the school. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you giving that, and I hope that the service that you receive in exchange is of very high quality, and that it makes your life better. Okay, social media. Here is the big thing. So if you're not going to watch this whole video, watch the first 15 minutes. What I'm going to talk about now is like the main big part. We need to understand that our brains are really, really good at filling in gaps without us being aware that we are filling in gaps. Part of the reason why, when we watch people on social media, we end up feeling so badly about ourselves. We end up feeling like failures. We end up feeling like we're not doing enough. We end up feeling like we're not accomplishing what we should be accomplishing. We're not achieving what we should be achieving. We're not doing what we should be doing. We are less than. We are terrible. We are whatever it is that we walk away from social media feeling. A huge part of that is because when we are looking at someone out there, and we are looking at their life, and we're looking at what they're sharing, and we're looking at what they're saying, and we're looking at what they're doing, there's the element of what they're showing us that can be true or false. Okay, so there's that level of it. Sometimes people really truly are lying about their situation. They're embellishing their situation. They're making things seem like they're greater than they actually are, and all of this stuff. And we also know that, right, as we watch people on social media talk about their lives, talk about their experiences, talk about what they did to find their perfect relationship or to heal their body or to whatever it is that they've done that makes them look so great and awesome online, we are not ever going to be able to see the whole picture. As authentic as someone wants to be, as transparent as someone wants to be, as much as whoever we're watching has the purest intention to share their story and to be as truthful and honest and authentic as possible, it is 100% impossible for us to ever see the full picture, the full story of someone's life and their humanity. And with that, we need to understand that we don't look at someone who's talking about their story, who's talking about whatever they're achieving in life, who's presenting themselves on social media to be this certain way. We don't look at that and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that I'm missing, that I'm not seeing, and I don't know what their whole story is. So maybe I can take some things that I relate to from what they're talking about. I can try it. I can see if it works for me. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Whatever. Rather, what our brains do, generally speaking, not always, but this is something that is very common, is they start to fill in the gaps for us. We make assumptions about where this person is coming from, what their day-to-day life is when the camera isn't on. We make assumptions about how they feel. We make assumptions about the things that they're thinking and saying and doing, right? We make assumptions. And usually these assumptions are based on our biases, our experiences, what we have gone through, what we expect other people to be and not be. We make assumptions that other people are like us, that other people are having a similar experience to us, and that they're just doing better with that experience than we are. With all of the stuff we're not seeing in that person's life, we tend to project our own assumptions and our own experience onto them, and then assume we're in the same place, we're having a similar experience. And look, they're achieving so much more than me, they're doing so much more than me, they're all doing all this stuff with the same circumstances and the same feelings and the same, mental state, physical state, emotional state, environmental conditions state as me. And they're just doing better than me. And we don't realize that we're doing that. we don't realize that in all the gaps that we're not seeing with someone and their life and their experience on social media, that there is going to be a tendency for us to project ourselves and our experience and our understanding onto that person. And then to, and this is kind of also how we see people with harsh criticism and judgment on social media as well, is we project ourselves onto someone else and go, right, like if I was in your situation, I wouldn't be able to do that. Or I would make this different choice and I would do this other thing. Or I would feel this way, or I would behave this way. And you are just another version of me who's making either a worse choice than me, doing something dumber than I would do, or you're making a better choice than me and doing better than me, and we're on equal playing field. That is the danger of comparing yourself to someone on social media, is that most of the time we are going to be projecting ourselves, projecting our experience, projecting our expectation onto someone, and then comparing and saying, because we are the same in these ways, I should be able to do what you're doing, because it's clear that you also are in this situation that I'm in and are just doing better. Or it's clear that you're in the situation that I'm in and you're just making worse choices than me. You're doing dumber stuff. I should be able to just tell you, no, you should just eat like this, or you should just do this, or you should just say this. Clearly you haven't thought about it. Because we're projecting ourselves into the gaps that are always going to be there when we are watching someone on social media. Does this make sense? We are always going to be interacting with gaps in our knowledge when we are looking at someone's life on social media. There is zero chance that anyone is ever, unless you literally filmed yourself 24/7 and had someone watching you 24/7 with no editing, and then somehow were also able to completely describe your inner experience, to completely describe everything that ever happened to you to get you to the point where you're at right now. There are going to be gaps. There are going to be things we just don't know about people. And rather than us being aware of that, rather than us being able to say, okay, this person, it seems like they're in the same situation as me and they're just doing better than me. Or it seems like they're in the same situation as me and they're just making a worse, dumber choice than me. But where might I be projecting myself and my experience and my expectation of where that person should be and what that person should be like onto that person, and then comparing myself to that story that I literally made up in my own head that I didn't even realize I made up. This whole painted image that I have of this person that might have nothing to do with real reality, but that I am then now comparing myself to and holding myself to as some sort of standard that I'm now not reaching. Right? Like, I have had people come up to me and be like, you must just be in a transcended state all the time. And they just assume that I walk around in this state of like pure bliss 24/7 because I've achieved self-love. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. That's not real. And I hope that I have explained that enough. But I will say it again. Self-love is a tool that I use when I'm dysregulated, when I'm upset, when life happens and it doesn't go how I want it to go, and it hurts and it sucks, and I'm sad and I'm angry and I'm upset and I experience all the normal emotions that a normal human goes through. I just know how to process them instead of shaming, blaming, and guilting myself, or instead of stuffing them down and pretending that they're not happening. But do me and my husband still have arguments? Absolutely. Do I still get frustrated at people in the checkout line when they're going really slow and I have something that I need to do? Absolutely. Right? I'm still a normal human being. I'm not some transcended individual. But it's very impossible for me to completely translate that. Unless, again, I was going to film myself 24/7 and show you, like, this is what it looks like on me to live a life of self-love. Right? And it can be really easy to look at my videos and make a bunch of assumptions about how I must be living my life, like even in the negative way, right? Like I've had lots of people assume things about my health and about my diet and about the way that I eat based on how I look, because they had no understanding of the chronic illness that I was dealing with. Because again, it's really difficult to translate that, and I'm not really trying to translate that, but we fill in the gaps. And I've had so many people come up to me and say, like, you should just eat more protein. All you need to do is this. And they have no idea what I'm actually doing. But they filled in all of these gaps and made up all of these stories about me without realizing that they're just projecting their own experience onto me. Okay, so now another example, right? We can look at influencers out there who seemingly worked their way up from nothing and now have these like fantastic businesses. And they tell us all the steps that they took to create these businesses. And they tell us all the things that they did. And they tell us all the manifestation tools. And they tell us all the manifestation techniques. And they tell us all the business strategy and all of that stuff. But they might be failing to leave out, either through ignorance or just, this is part of human nature. We can't always explain everything. I had support from my parents, right? I had people who, when I didn't know what I was doing and I lost my job or I quit my job, I had 6 months in there or a year in there where I had to move back home, or where my parents were sending me money every month, and we failed to mention that. And you might not have that situation. We might have someone who's like, I'm completely neurotypical. I did well in school. The system was kind of designed for me. It worked well for me. I was empowered by it. I had a secure connection growing up. My caregivers made me feel good about myself, generally speaking. I wasn't dealing with all of these hurdles of self-hate and doubt and feeling like I was a terrible, horrible piece of shit 24/7. So it was a lot easier for me to take risks and to fail and to try things than it might be for someone who's not neurotypical, than it might be for someone who didn't have a secure connection, than it might be for someone who doesn't have a safety net of their parents to take care of them. Do you see what I'm saying? There can be so many parts of the story that we are not seeing. And because we're not seeing them, we're not telling ourselves, there must be parts of this story I'm not seeing. We unconsciously, subconsciously project ourselves. We say, they must be feeling exactly how I'm feeling. They must be experiencing exactly what I've experienced. They must be in the same financial situation I'm in, the same physical situation that I'm in, the same mental, emotional situation that I'm in. And they're just doing better. And so why can't I do the things that they do? Or, if I do the things that they do, why doesn't it give me the same result? And this is a big, big, big one. Because a lot of the time, right, like for instance, with this self-love work, those of us that did not have a secure connection in our childhoods, who never experienced what real safe love was, are going to have a much harder time establishing inner self-love, establishing self-trust, establishing a sense of core identity that doesn't rely on pleasing other people. We are going to have a much, much harder time regulating our emotions, feeling safe in the world, establishing that feeling of love and goodness and moving past our shame, blame, and guilt than someone who had a secure connection. Period. End of story. If we never experience that in our childhoods, this work is going to be climbing a mountain that someone who had a secure connection is never going to have to climb. So we might be comparing ourselves to someone who had a completely different situation than us and thinking, I'm doing worse than them. When in reality, we didn't start on an equal playing field and do the same things, and they just got better results than you because they are superior to you. We started with you way down here and them way up here. So you guys take the same steps, they're still going to be way ahead of you. They weren't in debt, right? This is a metaphor that I use often, especially in my coaching, is to understand that a lot of us, based on how we were treated in our childhoods, based on having chronic illness, based on having neurodivergence in some way, when it comes to interacting with the world, we have to be realistic in that this hinders our capacity to be successful in the system. So people who don't have those things pretend they start at $0 in their bank account. And then they get love from their caregivers. And then they get supported in the things that they're good at. And then they get, a healthy body that they just have all their life. They're already racking up. They're in the green before they even start. And then you might have come from someone who, again, you did not experience a secure connection. So you learned codependency. You learned how to abandon yourself. You learned how to betray yourself. You had complex PTSD, which the world doesn't even, so you can't point, you say, like, I had this, very specific abuse happen to me. Or I had this very specific thing I can point to that society says, yeah, that's a trauma. But rather, I was just emotionally abandoned over and over and over and over again, to the point where I learned to just completely dissociate from my emotions. Now we're in the negative. Maybe you have chronic illness and it didn't get treated. Or it did get treated, but it hinders your capacity to function. Maybe you have, again, neurodivergence. Some ways in which you just can't tolerate the system. You're more sensitive than other people. You're starting in the negative. So now you're going to do work. This person's going to do work. Both of you are taking steps. And you're just climbing out of debt. You're going to look at your life and be like, I'm not getting it together. I'm not achieving anything. I'm still worse than neutral. And I'm doing all this work. I must suck. Because look, they're doing what I think I should be doing. I'm following the same steps that they followed. I'm doing what they said they did. And look at, they're just skyrocketing. And I'm way down here. I must suck. And it's because, again, we're comparing ourselves as someone who started in debt to someone who started in the green. And we're looking at our journey, and even when we can understand that, it's so difficult to look at being in debt and doing all this work and still being in debt. Right? Like when you're $1 million in debt and you save $500,000, like that is incredible. Think about that. Like think about how much work and time and energy and money and effort would go into saving $500,000, and you're still $500,000 in debt. That's how some of us started our adulthood. $1 million in debt. And so we have been working and working and working and working and working. And we're making progress. We're doing stuff. We have coping mechanisms. We have self-sabotage. We have all this stuff we're trying to work on with our self-love and our personal growth and our spiritual path. And we've made progress. And we've done well. And we're doing better. And it still looks like we don't have our lives together. And a lot of the time it's just because from where we started, it's a long road to stability. And so when we're comparing ourselves to someone who had stability, to someone who had access to things we didn't have access to someone who started in a place that was better than us, and we're judging ourselves as inadequate in comparison, it's not a fair judgment. And again, we don't realize we're doing it because it is so natural for us to project ourselves onto others that we don't recognize that we're doing it. It's so normal and natural for us to just assume they are like me, I am like them, and we are just making different choices or just doing better or worse than each other. When in real reality, we had completely different circumstances. So when we're on social media, this is my challenge to you. When you're scrolling social media and you're comparing yourself to someone, I want you to really take a step back and be like, do I know this person's whole life story? Have I put it all into context? Where they started, what they had, how their life, how their demeanor, how their mental state, how their physical state, how their emotional state, how their childhood was different than mine. And how that might be affecting the outcomes that they have. Right? Like I follow someone on YouTube and they have amazing fitness videos. And essentially during COVID, their YouTube channel blew up. And now basically they're like living in a lot of ways a dream life that that would have been my dream life. They used to be a dancer. Now they're a fitness instructor and they live in Thailand and they have adopted a cat and she's got like this perfect body and she's like socially acceptable and right, she had a dance career. She did all this stuff and now she like barely has to work. And you can look at that and be like, man, I've been on YouTube for 10 years. And I don't have anywhere near 4 million subscribers. I didn't get to have a dance career. I didn't get to do all this stuff. And I could look at her and be like, she's doing so much better than me. But the real truth is, right, during COVID, when her dance career was no longer possible, she moved back in with her parents. She had support. She had an able body her whole life. She had a socially acceptable body her whole life. it was a lot easier for her to just get on the internet and show her body and show her workouts and to have everyone approve of her than it was for me. Because we have totally different life experiences. So it's not a fair comparison for me to be like, wow, right? Like, she like blew up on YouTube. What did she do that I'm not doing? It's like, well, 1.5 million different things are the reason why she was able to do what she did that I'm probably never going to be able to do. And it's not because I suck. And it's not because I'm not doing good enough. Right? It was the same thing with at the beginning of my YouTube channel, and I compared myself to other spiritual teachers or other like that, like people who were gaining way more subscribers and all that stuff than me. Well, they were willing to do stuff I wasn't willing to do. They were willing to what I eat in a days and do all this stuff, and I was like, well, that's not what, right? I wasn't willing to do the clickbait things. And so we make sacrifices. But the bottom line is, again, we have to understand that when we're taking advice from somebody, when we're comparing ourselves to somebody, is it a fair one-to-one comparison or not? And that can be really, really difficult. So again, I really want you to take a step back to everyone you're comparing yourself to and be like, what do I know about their situation? And where am I filling in the gaps that I might not be correct in how I'm filling in those gaps? Where am I projecting my experience and my expectation? Right? So we may not be projecting our experience, but we may be projecting our expectation onto this person. So again, we might be saying, okay, someone who's following a self-love path, I expect that what it's supposed to look like on them is that they are in this state of bliss all the time. And I assume that they must be in that state, and I'm not, so I'm failing. And it's like, did anyone even say that that's what was happening? Or did I just make that up? Did I just assume that that's what should be happening? And therefore I must be failing because I'm not experiencing that. When in real reality, no one even said that that was the outcome I was supposed to be achieving. We need to start to look at our stories and where we are projecting ourselves onto the people that we're looking at, where we are projecting our expectations onto the people we're comparing ourselves to, where we are filling in the gaps that are always going to exist and then comparing ourselves to that instead of understanding that we are not seeing the full reality. So then a healthy way to be able to use someone else's experience that we're seeing online is, again, we can take people's steps and we can take people's advice and we can try it on and we can see how it goes. And then we can just say, if it works for me, great, it works for me. New tool in the toolbox. If it doesn't work for me, it's not because I suck. It's not because I'm failing. It's not because I'm not doing good enough. It's not because I'm not trying hard enough. If what I'm seeing and what I'm trying, based on what seems to have worked or what someone has said has worked for them, isn't working for me, I need different tools. I need different support. This is, again, why, like, for instance, with all of my YouTube videos and all of my everything in the mystery school, there's 400 million different tools. that I have put out there. And some of them seemingly contradict themselves. Because the reality is, on this path of self-love, there is no one right thing we should all be doing at all times. There is no one right answer. There is no one right practice. Rather, there's multiple different tools that are useful at different times. For some of us, we're in a phase where we need to process that our caregivers let us down. That we were really hurt by the way we were treated by them. That it really deeply affected us. Their abandonment or their abuse or their ways that they couldn't be there for us even though they wanted to be. And we are in a phase where we have to start to let that inner child that had to blame themselves for the pain we were in, to finally see that no, it was your caregivers who were doing the wrong thing. That you were being really hurt and you adapted in all of these ways. So now all your coping, your numbing, your scapegoat, all your bad habits, all the things you think are wrong with you are the ways you adapted to not getting your needs met because your caregivers weren't meeting your needs. And you are in a phase where you need to be mad at them, where you need to be sad, where you need to feel sorry for yourself, where you need to not be looking for where's your power and how can you stand up for yourself and how can you make it better for yourself, because you need to go through a phase of validation and catharsis. And that's where you're at. And that's what's healthy for you right now. And then someone else might be in a phase where it's time to start saying, okay, that is the shit that happened. I have a full or a pretty full understanding of how it affected me and how it created all my bad habits and how none of this is my fault. And I've been mad and I've been angry and maybe I've cut my parents out for a little while and I've gone through this whole thing. And now I'm in a phase where I feel genuinely like it's time to start figuring out what I'm going to do about it. Or it's time to start saying, okay, it is what it is. I got really messed up. I have all this pain. I have all this stuff. I let myself cry. I let myself be angry. I let myself rant. I let myself have the, panic attacks of realizing that my caregivers weren't there for me and the existential crisis that is. And now I'm ready to start figuring out what I need to do to support myself. Now I'm ready to start figuring out how to mature myself and to grow myself into an adult without the help of my caregivers. Now I'm ready to start figuring out who I am. And it's hard and I'm totally lost and I don't know where to start, but that's the new phase I'm in. And these two people need very different things. So if we compare where this person is in the angry phase, in the sad phase, and we project this person's experience onto them, where they're in the empowerment phase, this person is going to be like, you're giving your power away. You're just being lazy. You're blaming stuff for, your life when you need to just take your power back. And that's true for this person, but it's not true for this person. So if we're projecting this experience onto this person, we're robbing them of the phase that they're in, that they need to be in order to heal. We're projecting. If we're the kind of person who wasn't really harmed by our caregivers, who our caregivers supported us, we were pretty safe, we were pretty loved, we can look at someone who's really struggling with anger and sadness and resentment towards their caregivers and be like, man, you just need to get over it. I mean, my parents were kind of shitty sometimes too, but wow. Because we're projecting our experience onto them. And our experience was our parents were pretty good. We don't have a lot to process. So we can look at someone whose parents were really not great and be like, you need to grow up. And that's a projection. We're filling in the gaps and assuming that they had an experience like us when they didn't. And then vice versa. We might be in that state where we need to be angry. We need to be sad, and it's going to last longer than we think it's going to last. And we're not finding our power right now. We're processing and validating. And we might look at someone who had a secure attachment, who isn't angry at their parents, who can have a good relationship with their parents or their caregivers, and be like, I suck. I'm just holding on to resentment. I'm just not as spiritually developed as that person. I should be as good as them. What's wrong with me that I'm still upset and I need to just shut this down and move on? When it's like, no, you have a completely different experience than them. You're doing exactly what you should be doing, and it looks very different from them. Because there isn't a right way. So you see what I'm saying here? We can try on the things that other people are trying on. And if it doesn't work for us, we need to be able to say, it doesn't work for me because it's not where I'm at. Maybe that is great advice when I'm 10 steps down the road. Maybe I'll come back to it. Maybe that'll never apply to me because their situation is just completely different than mine. It is so important that we realize where we are projecting ourselves, where we are projecting our own expectations, and then comparing ourselves to that versus comparing ourselves to the reality of someone that we're looking at. And then, of course, there's like the superficial level of it, which I do want to speak to a little bit. We are in an age where we are starting to forget what a normal face looks like, what a normal body looks like, what it's like to be a human who hasn't had tweakments and treatments and enhancements and filters. Because even out in the real world now, cosmetic surgeries and treatments and tweakments are getting so normalized and kind of subtilized and all of this stuff that it can be difficult to tell who has had something done and what they are doing. And we gotta understand, right? Like influencers who are telling us, this is my diet for healthy skin, or this is my, makeup hack for big lips or whatever. So much of the time, again, we are not seeing what they are actually doing. Again, I follow this one influencer who every 6 months has these giant, her lips just get blown up. And she's always like, I'm having an allergy attack every 6 months. Or I got stung by a bee and it's like clockwork. And at some point you gotta be like, honey, you're just getting fillers. And that's what it looks like on the day you get the filler treatment. They're swollen and red. Because a lot of people, again, are promoting a natural lifestyle, or they're promoting a makeup product, or they're promoting a thing. And that is not really what's getting them the results that they're getting. But they can't say that because they have a brand deal, or because we are living in the age where your self is your brand. That people can't be honest about who and what they actually are, without people being like, oh, it's a lie. There isn't some natural way to be like you. There isn't a product so much that I can just buy off the shelf and be like this influencer. It's because this influencer is making so much money that they can afford the thousands of dollars a year to enhance their face and then say it's the lipstick. Do you see what I'm saying? again, when we look at people on social media and their faces and their hair and their bodies, I think, unfortunately, the healthiest thing to do is most of the time to assume it's fake on some level. Like, not that I think that that's great, that we have to, like, assume everyone's lying. And also that people are lying by omission. Like, a lot of the time, people just don't say. They don't say, hey, I got, like, cheek fillers. They don't say, I had a jaw surgery. They don't say, my hair cost $2,000. We're not seeing it. We're just comparing and thinking, wow, that person has great skin. Wow, that person has great hair. And we ask them how they get it, and they say sweet potatoes. Right? And it's just, we really have to protect ourselves when we're on social media. And I think the best thing to do a lot of the time is to assume people are lying. Especially when it comes to, like, beauty and image and all of this stuff. If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And when they are honest, people are brutal. Exactly. Right? Like, and so then this is the other thing that I want to say, is that a lot of the time, social media influencers, because we are in the age of the personal brand, which is so incredibly toxic and unhealthy. This is part of the reason why I think my YouTube channel never blew up, because I refused to make my life my brand. People wanted an inside look into my life, and they wanted to know me personally, and I was like, no, that's not what this is going to be about. Because that's what we expect on social media. I was like, no, I am here to provide a service. And that's my job. And then there's me and my life that you are not going to have access to. And people are not used to that. So we have the age of the social media brand, where we are living in a world where we are so disconnected, and we have such a lack of community and such a lack of real connection, that we are finding connection through these parasocial relationships of people's personal brands. And what's part of the personal brand is the vulnerable share. So we have a lot of people out there who are using their vulnerable life stories as a selling point for their products. They're using their own experience as, I was in the pit, and this is how I was in the pit, and here's how I got out of it, and you can now get out of that same pit because I'm connecting with you and your humanity through my vulnerable share in this parasocial one-way relationship that makes you feel seen and heard and connected in a fake way. And here's how I got out of it and buy my product. So they tell you about the leaky roof, because that's a vulnerable share that's allowed on the internet, right? They tell you about their panic attack. They tell you about that is, I thought I was having a heart attack, but it's just anxiety. Because it's so popular, unfortunately, in a weird way, to be anxious right now. So everyone's vulnerable, sharing about their anxiety. But no one's telling you about the cockroaches. No one's telling you about the rotten floorboards. Because those are the things that are still not allowed to be talked about. So I'm not telling you that I'm still crying myself to sleep every night, afraid that I'm going to die. I'm not telling you that I'm still arguing with my husband every single day about the dishes. I'm not showing you all the ways in which my product didn't heal and fix everything in my life. But you think that it did, because I gave you my vulnerable share, which made you think that you know me, which made you think we are the same, we're having the same experience. You projected your whole experience onto them. And then they're saying, I'm better now. And you're going, so then I should be perfectly better too. All of these other things that I know are going on in my life are going to be fixed by this thing too. Because you didn't tell me that all of these other things that are going on in your life are still going on in your life. Do you see what I'm saying? The vulnerable share is almost the most dangerous part. Because it makes us feel like, see, I'm right. I'm right to project myself onto this person. I'm right that we're having the same experience. And then you project your whole self onto them. And they are not telling you about the cockroaches, and they're not telling you about the rotten floorboards that still exist. You are aware of your cockroaches. You are aware of your rotten floorboards. They told you about the leaky ceiling. You also have a leaky ceiling. You assume we're all on the same playing field. They have gotten rid of the leaky ceiling, but also they probably got rid of the cockroaches and the floorboards. I still have the floorboards and the cockroaches. I suck. You see? We have to be so aware that the vulnerable share isn't everything. They aren't telling us the whole story. Don't project your whole experience. Just because you resonate with a single part of their story doesn't mean the thing that they did solved everything. Okay, I got 2 comments here. And the saddest thing about this culture to me is how big it is. Like it consumes the media's people conversation and how they spend their money and free time. Well, that's exactly it, right? We are living in the age of not enough. We are living in the age of hyper consumption and production, where consumption and production have been valued over everything else. Where human life is valued based on how well it serves the system of consumption and production, and profit increasing every quarter. That's what we're living in. And then we're convinced that when we can't keep up with that, and when we feel terrible in that culture, that it is a lack of consumption and production that is the problem, and we need more of it. Instead of being able to see, no, it is the hyper focus on consumption and production that is the problem. There's not enough mentality, where we all feel like we just need to be doing more and consuming more, is the big bottom line problem. That's why, again, I believe the self-love path is so important. Because shame, blame, and guilt, the reason you don't feel good in your life is because of you. Shame, blame, and guilt are the tools by which we continue to be manipulated into participating in this system of hyperconsumption and hyperproduction, and never connecting with our real humanity, our emotions, one another, nature and the environment, our bodies, where we disconnect from all of it so that we can try to be more consumptive and productive, and just continue to think that we're failing when we have nervous breakdowns and when we don't feel good and when we have self-sabotage and all of these things, because we're conditioned to believe that what is happening is normal and that we should be thriving in it, when really it's very, very, very abnormal. It is not how human beings were designed to live and to thrive and to be happy. This is why coming out of shame, blame, and guilt is so important. This is why the self-love path is the revolutionary path. Because when we can finally break out of, I feel like shit because I am shit, into, wait, what? What's going on with this system? Is this really what's going to bring happiness? Is this really what's going to bring peace? That's how we break out of this. And obviously beyond that, self-harm that people end up inflicting on themselves for not achieving their goals. Exactly. And it's like, is it even your goal? Or is it the goals you've been told you have to have in order to measure up and feel good about yourself? And even if you achieve them, you never will. Because there's always going to be another goal. There's always going to be someone else out there who's doing more than you. There's always going to be a next level. There's always going to be more you could be doing and achieving and accomplishing or letting go of and consuming and producing. There's never a limit. We have to find where the limit is, where our enough is. because the world is not going to give you permission to have that. So again, are we comparing ourselves to someone who's in a state of overconsumption and production and saying that's what success is and that's what I should be, when in real reality that is not healthy or sustainable for anybody? They are exploiting themselves, or they are relying upon an exploitative system in order to achieve. There's so many layers to this. That's why the mystery school is 5 years long. Because there's so much to unpack. So when we're on social media, where am I projecting myself? Where am I projecting my expectation? Where am I coming up with a narrative that might not be true? Where might I be having started from a totally different place than this other person? Where are they not me, and where am I not them? How are our conditions different? So it looks like they're doing so much better than me, but maybe it's because they had completely different circumstances than I did, and I do. Does what they're sharing work for me? And if not, it's not because I suck and I'm failing and I'm not trying hard enough. It's probably because we're at different places. We're not the same. What worked for them isn't going to work for me because we're not the same. Where am I assuming that someone is stupid and just doesn't know what they're doing and haven't thought it through? When it's like, I don't actually know what their experience is, and I'm projecting myself onto them. How do you deal with the frustration of wanting their life? Well, first, validate that. I want other people's lives sometimes too. Sometimes we just have to be sad that other people have it better than us, and we have to let ourselves be upset about that. Right? We start with validating where we are. That's always the first step. Compassion. How can you support yourself where you're at? How can you let yourself just be upset and wish you had something different? Right? Do you know there are days where I wake up and I'm like, if I just had a functioning colon. Do I wish my life was different sometimes? Absolutely. How much more could I have done in my life without this? And I let myself be sad about that sometimes, and angry about that sometimes. And then I move into, how can I support myself? Just what do I need right now to feel supported? What do I need right now to feel better and empowered? How can I look for the positive? Right? One and then the other, not either or. We need to be validated. We need to be allowed to be upset. We need to be allowed to go into our dark place sometimes. And then when we feel complete with that, we start to say, okay, where's my empowerment? Where are my steps? How can I appreciate my life? How can I start to just continue to reinvest in my life and the life that I actually have and making it better for myself? Does that make sense? Compassion and then curiosity. For me, as weird as it sounds, I compare myself again with someone in a worse situation than me and practice gratitude. That's always a viable option. I do that too. Because, right, as bad as my health conditions are, there are people who have it way worse than me. And I am very, very grateful for the privileges that I have. And I'm just going to use all of those to my advantage. Right? This is the reality of being human. We all have been dealt a different hand of cards. Some better, some worse. And we can really only just deal with what we actually have. So we can't ever really compare ourselves to someone else because no one has it exactly like you. As cliche as that sounds. So we can take the similarities, but we also have to realize the differences and put equal weight on them. when we're comparing ourselves to someone else. Okay? Okay. So we have any more questions, concerns before we end? I hope that this was helpful. I hope this was clarifying. I hope it brought a new level of self-awareness, something we can practice so that we don't get sucked into it. You are really deep, thank you. Yeah. Maybe she's born with it, maybe it's autism. All right. Thank you for being here. You are good enough. You are doing your best with your circumstances that are unique to you. Thank you, and always grateful for you. I'm grateful for you too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your energy and your questions and your interactions. I love all of it. Join the mystery school, and I will see you in the next video.